Perhaps the most dramatic part of Parshas Toldot is Perek Zayin, the 27th chapter, when Yitzchak Avinu tells Esav to prepare his hunting material, to make these delicacies which he loves, in order to bestow the blessing upon him. Rivka Imenu overhears this, dresses Yaakov Avinu up in the clothes of Esav, prepares the same delicacies, and Yaakov Avinu is able to, pretending that he is Esav, quote-unquote, take the brachos from his brother, steal the brachos, and when Esav comes back, he cries bitterly that he was duped and that the brachos were taken away from him. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount to be said on this parsha, and perhaps the most obvious of the questions, which really needs a lot more analysis than what we can offer today. Today will really be Roshei Prakim, just to touch on where was Yitzchak Avinu to think that Esav was deserving of the brachas. Did he not realize who Esav was, and that Yaakov Avinu was more deserving of the two? What was it about Esav that Yitzchak felt that he was worthy of the brachos? And again, there's a lot of ink written on this, but this is a question that has to be dealt with. Our concern today will be, although dealing with this question through a different lens, focusing on something really different, but coming back to this question. And that is the first pasuk. We know the first pasuk is like the topic sentence of the perek, and it introduces to us, gives us the information that we will need for the entire perek. Pasuk tells us that it came to pass when Yitzchak had become old, and his eyes dim from seeing, Vatechahena einav, that he summoned Esav, his older son. He said to him, my son, and he said to him, here I am, and then making his request. The question becomes, what was the reason why Yitzchak Avinu's eyes were dimmed? And you're right, there are those that say, the pasuk tells us he has become old, and in old age, people's eyes become dim. But obviously, if the Chumash is going to tell us this, and mention this specifically, there must be a reason for this. Rashi offers 3 reasons for Yitzchak's failing eyesight. One, from the smoke of the incense that Esav's wife offered to their idols. The greater person is, the more sensitive he is to evil, more than anyone else, was affected by the idolatrous incense smoke that contaminated his surroundings. Further, God caused him the blindness to spare him from continuing to see idol worship in his household. That's a Medrash Tanchuma. So first reason is, and this connects to the last pasuk in the previous parak, that Esav took wives, and they were moras ruach, and they were bitter spirit. They caused tremendous difficulty to Yitzchak and to Rivka. So the connection is, why were they moras ruach? Because they offered this incense and Avodah Zarah literally in his house. 2, when Yitzchak lay bound on the altar at the Akedah, the ministering angels wept over him. Their tears fell into his eyes and dimmed them. Now obviously there's a lot of Torah on this as well. Some people explain it that this means that Isaac saw a heavenly vision of the suffering angels, a sight beyond ordinary human powers of the suffering angel, and the glow of the vision weakened his eyesight. That's the Yefei Torah on the Medrash. So reason number 1 was the smoke of the idolatry. Reason number 2 was when Yitzchak Avinu, as a youngster, was on the Akedah, the Malachim were crying, and obviously this is an imagery that has to be understood, and the tears went into his eyes, and that blinded him. And 3, his providence caused his blindness so that Yaakov might receive the blessing without Yitzchak realizing whom he was blessing. So the third is a technical reason. Why was he blind or dimmed of eyes? So he wouldn't know he was blessing, and that way Yaakov Avinu would be able to usurp the bracha from Esav. Now obviously, before we take each one of these levels and try to understand it a little bit more deeply, this Rashi, we have to understand that any time Rashi brings 3 different interpretations, it's darsheni. You have to ask why. And for Rashi to offer all 3 and not one begs us to see that all 3 have something to offer that only one would not have something to offer. And there are different explanations given for this. I just want to offer, just very briefly, a number. One is Rav Rivlin in Enea Parashah, where he speaks about that all three answers are giving us a sense into Yitzchak Avinu. That all three are giving us a sense into the Midah of Gvura. And he translates Gvura in source 3 as his inner world. He says, for example, could you imagine if Avraham Avinu's house had a Avodah Zarah, what would happen in that house? Right? Avraham Avinu as a child destroyed them. He would have, destroyed them and opened up a seminary to teach these wives how to act appropriately. What does Yitzchak Avinu do? He withdraws. The blinding, that eyesight of not seeing, is like turning a blind eye. He withdraws inside of himself. The Akedah experience made him on a different level as well, withdrawing inside of himself. And that explains as well the idea of not giving Yaakov the bracha, and that Yaakov had to, so to speak, underhanded way, get the bracha in this way, is because of this midah of gvura, says Rav Rivlin. Yitzchak Avinu wanted to bless Esav with being able to take this physical world and master it in the midah of gvura. And as Rav Rivlin notes, and a lot of Mefarshim point out, that Yitzchak Avinu never intended to give the Birkas Haaretz, the spiritual blessing, to Esav. So the question we began with was, how could Yitzchak Avinu have blessed Esav? Did he not know who he was? Of course he knew who he was. And he never intended to give the spiritual blessing to him. And we never see him telling him, don't marry a woman from this country. And clearly the Birkas Abraham is given at the end of the parak to Yaakov Avinu. But he understood that Mishmanei Haaretz, Tal Shamayim, this was something within the midah of Gvura that Esav could be able to take and to channel and to be able to utilize, if he utilized it appropriately, in Avodas Hashem. So again, Rav Rivlin sees all three as different components of Yitzchak Avinu's character of Gvura. The Shemin HaTov notes, and very fascinating, in source number 4, that they're talking about three different tkufas in Yitzchak Avinu's life. The tkufa, the period of the Akedah, was the past. The period of the wives is the present. And the period of the blessing is the future. And saying that it was almost in gradations that Yitzchak Avinu's eyesight failed him. At first was dimmed so he shouldn't see his father with a knife up over his head. So God did him a favor. It was a chesed to dim his eyes. The second was a favor as well. He shouldn't see the idolatry going on in his house. So the dimming of the eyes was a chesed of Hashem that Hashem did for him. And now when Yaakov Avinu needs to get the bracha, so this too is coming from Hashem, that now his eyesight is further dimmed. So the Shemin HaTov sees all three answers of Rashi as different parts. Not three different answers, but different parts of Yitzchak Avinu's life where his eyes became further dimmed till this point now at old age that his eyes need to be dimmed in order for Yaakov Avinu to get both brachos. The final selection I'd just like to mention, and again it's just a selection, is the Yamin Yaakov, who says that there's really a question on each one of them, and that's why Rashi brings all three. And he notes in source 6, if you say Dal Gorei Mishon is the Asher Avodah Zarah, is the incense, Yesh Lavin Madu Lo Hezi Kashan Rivka. Why did it not affect Rivka? And there are those who explain that she was used to it from her father's house, but we have to remember she was 3 years old, or at most 14 years old. When she saw it, she's an old lady now. Like, she's going to remember what happened then. That's our question on the first answer. Why was his eyes dimmed and not hers? On the second answer, what is the connection between the Malachim crying and now in his old age? The Malachim crying happened years ago. And in fact, the Medrash says he went into Gan Eden to be healed. Was it not his eyesight healed as well? And according to the third answer, it's in order for Yaakov Avinu to get the bracha, you're to make a tzaddik suffer by having limited vision, just that Yaakov Avinu should get the bracha. Hayad Hashem tiksar, is there not any other way that Yaakov Avinu get the bracha? Of course there is. So he suggests that the three answers are really playing on mirot, re'iyah. And the three answers are dealing with different types of seeing. There's literal seeing. There's seeing in source 8, which is Havana, with understanding. And there's seeing, which is about Nevuah, or Ena Veloata. And all three answers are dealing with different aspects of seeing. Where Yitzchak Avinu was affected not only by his physical sight, but through his understanding of what's happening around him, through the nevuah that he wasn't aware of a Ravi Avod Sair, and that's why Yaakov Avinu he was dimmed from that understanding of the nevuah. That's why Yaakov Avinu had to get the bracha in this way. So he's understanding the idea of Re'iyah in three different ways, and therefore the Rashi brings three different interpretations. We'll just make mention on the Yamin Yaakov's question of did not Rivka Imenu also become affected? I mean, the last time she saw this Ashan was at a young age. So Titcha Elyon notes, Ro'im Pela Pla'im HaKocha Shel Hashpa. You see from here in source 7 the impact of influence. That Yitzchak became blind because of this, and Rivka, she wasn't that far from his level. But she wasn't affected. Why? Because tens of years before she had experienced this. You see from here, says that even somebody from a young age has to be careful of the hashpah that they have. And how careful you have to be, the question always becomes until what age can you show kids things that, like mixed swimming or whatever it may be. And you see from here that even at a very young age, maybe mixed swimming is the wrong example, but you understand whatever example you want to use, that, people are affected by what they see. And that we shouldn't just poo-poo, they're just, a little kid, what do they know? What are they going to remember? No, there is a halacha of at a certain age, a child remembers things and a child sees things. And that's why in 9a, the Majesty of Man, based on the teachings of Henoch Leibowitz, that's how the Chavetz Chaim Rosh Yeshiva, says that Rivka, who's raised in the environment of idolatry and impurity, totally rejected that lifestyle. She lived a life of righteousness and holiness. To achieve such a level of holiness, her hatred of evil and idol worship must have been extreme. No matter how vigorously one tries to combat it, environmental factors nevertheless make an impact. In the exact situation where one has battled and even succeeded in overcoming its environment, a residue of tolerance for that same situation is subconsciously retained. We must be aware of the influence that every element of our surroundings can have upon us, whether it's our workplace, school, neighborhood, and of course our home. We must try to keep our environment constantly pure. We should not be fooled by our rationalization that the bad environment will not affect us. It will. So this is aspect number 1 that I just wanted to really mention very briefly. Is that Rashi bringing 3 interpretations is giving us a sense of Yitzchak Avinu's Gvura. It's giving us a sense that it happened in gradations, past, present, and future. And it's giving us a sense that his vision was not only impaired physically, that he saw the Ashan, but that his vision was impaired with a level of understanding. His nevuah was impaired. There were many levels of impairment going on here, and we have to realize that if Yitzchak Avinu was affected and Rivka Imenu wasn't affected, what a powerful influence our childhood has on us. That doesn't mean we're doomed. Right? Rivka Imenu became Rivka Imenu. Don't get us wrong. But we who are raising the next generation have to be careful, and we have to realize that what our children see makes an impact on them, whether we realize it or not. Now, before beginning our study, which is going to be to take a look at each one of the answers and see how that gives us a glimpse into perhaps what was the mindset of Yitzchak Avinu giving Esav the bracha. Notwithstanding the first answer we already gave, he was only giving him Berkas Haaretz and not Berkas Avraham, the spiritual bracha. I'd like to preface understanding our first level of the Ashan, of the Ketoret, with a very interesting insight of the Lehi Gayon. He quotes here in source 10 the Rashbam and the Sforno, who give other reasons for Yitzchak Avinu's eyesight being dim. The Rashbam, as we mentioned, was because of his old age, and the Sforno is Shenanash Yitzchak al Shalom Micha be'esav. When a father does not, or a teacher does not stop a child, like we see this with Eli and his children, right? Lo Micha bevanav, Achi Ashiloni, with Yeravam. Then your eyesight becomes dim. You turned a blind eye. You didn't stop what was going on, and therefore, measure for measure, these things happen to you. Continues the Alehi Gayon and asks the following question. He says, is it not fascinating that Rashi, who brings these three answers that we mentioned, does not bring or quote a Gemara which Beferish talks about why did Yitzchak Avinu's eyes become dim? And the Gemara talks about Asur la'adam listakel b'tselem demut adam rasha. A person is not allowed to look at a rasha, an evil person. And the proof text of this is Yitzchak Avinu. He looked at Esav, he had a relationship with Esav, and his eyes became dim. And the Gemara says, V'hagar malei, v'amar Rabbi Yitzchak la'olam alti klalos hajos kala beinecha. What caused this? That he looked at this rasha. He said it was caused by the klola of Avimelech, and that you shouldn't take the klola of a hedjo, of a simpleton, he's just a regular person. If he curses me out, what's the big deal? No. Just like a birkas hedjo shouldn't be kala beinecha. If someone gives you a bracha, even if they seem to be a simple person, answer amen, it carries weight. So to the klola of even a simple person carries weight. Where do you see this? You see this with Avimelech. Avimelech, when he took Sarah and then returned her to Avram, he says, Hinehu lecha ksut einayim. What is ksut einayim? So Gemara says, don't read it as ksut einayim, read it as kisiyat einayim, the covering of the eyes. That as a result of this curse, that your eyes should be covered, the curse didn't happen to Sarah, it happened to her child, and that his eyes were blinded and covered from seeing who Esav was. And in fact, the Rav Yosef Salan draws this out very clearly. He said that because she fooled, in source number 12, she fooled Avimelech, and she caused him pain by making believe she was somebody she wasn't, that she was Avinu's sister and not his wife. Therefore the klola was a midah k'neged midah, that Esav pretended to be somebody who he really wasn't. He pretended to be a tzaddik when he wasn't a tzaddik. What caused Yitzchak Avinu to not be able to see this clearly? What caused him to be able then to have a relationship with him and look him in the face, even though he was a rasha? It was this klola of ksut einayim, of the covering of the eyes. So here the Alehi Gayon continues by saying that it's because of this ksut einayim, of this covering of the eyes, of this klola, that he didn't see anything wrong in Esav. And since he didn't see anything wrong in Esav, there was nothing stopping him from looking at Esav, and therefore there was nothing wrong in stopping him from having these wives doing what they're doing. And therefore when Rashi says that he was affected by the incense of his wives, he's really alluding to this idea of the Gemara, that he was able to be in a house without stopping this incense from going on. It's because he was able to live with a rasha. And what enabled him to live with this rasha and not be micha, not stop him, and not try to push him out, it's because of the klola of Avimelech. So Rashi, although doesn't say it, he alludes to this answer. This idea that the Sforno says, and that is brought down from the Gemara, of the severity of looking at an Adam Rasha, is something that I want to focus in on for a number of moments before being able to take this into, we'll finally get into our study of how this answer connects with our overall question of how can Yitzchak Avinu bless Esav. And that's an idea that Reb Chaim HaKohen HaChalva notes at length in a beautiful essay in Pnei Chaim, where he says, the Kasher, source 13, Adam shomer al atzmo malabiv litpa'el hamitrachesh sivo, When a person is very careful about looking at what surrounds him, then you'll be zochet to have the Ashras HaShechina. And a person has to be very careful about what they see. And he notes in 14, V'nira dechomer yisur listakel b'dmut adam rasha. Why is it so bad to stare at, to look at a person who's a rasha? Because ein yetzer hara sholeit el b'mi she'einav ro'ot. Uveir ha'inyan hu, ki k'shadam ro'eh u'mistakel b'davar kolshin. This is the yisod. When a person looks at something, when a person stares at something, oto hadavar nefach liyot chelek mimenu, it becomes part of him. And this is the idea that Ibn Ezra speaks about on the Chisita at Seitecha going out to war. Ki kol davar nireh leinayim v'umiguneh yolid dmut gnai v'nefet. When you see something inappropriate, it creates a certain inappropriate aspect within you. V'lachein istaklos b'dmut adam rasha tolichas v'shalom k'dmut harasha b'nafsha. V'godel hashpai gdola kolkach ashafilu tzadik v'kadosh ki Yitzchak Avinu. You see the power of looking at a rasha, and look at Yitzchak Avinu. That Yitzchak Avinu, who was the greatest of tzaddikim, who was looking at Esav, this big rasha, his eyes became dim, he became affected. And if this is true about Yitzchak Avinu, what do we say about us? How our environment and what we see. People say, you are what you eat, you are what you see. It makes an impact on you. And we know this psychologically, that people remember things, even if it's not in the conscious level. In the subconscious level, they remember what they hear, they remember what they see. Even from a very young age, it makes an imprint on a person. And that explains, he said, in 15b, why if a person did a sin that is that's worthy for him to have skila, which is throwing a person off a building and then stoning him, who are the first person to throw the stones on him? Are the Eidim, are the witnesses who witnessed this atrocity that this person did. Why? Because when they see this Aveira, nitkarer b'nafshotam inyan hazirut min hachet, they're desensitized. They no longer have this sense of, oh my gosh, this is so terrible, because they saw a person doing it. And therefore, to rid themselves of this feeling, they have to be able to throw the first stones. You see the power here, that just seeing something can have a negative effect on you, and just seeing something can desensitize you. Like if you never would dream you would do something, then you see someone doing it, you say, well, it's not so bad. This person did it, I can do it also. That's the power of Re'iyah, that's the power of seeing, and that's how careful we have to be. The Orpnei Chaim offers a very deep insight, which I'd just like to share very briefly. He says in the second parak, in Pirkei Avos, we have the 5 students, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, with each one having a different attribute. And we know Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinus is described as bor sod she'ein ma'abed tipa. It's like a cistern that doesn't lose any water. And he is the one that says, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asks, what are the derech, what's the path a person should go on in life, he's the one who says you should have an ayin tova, a good eye. So the Mefarshim speak about what is the connection between their attributes and what they said. It's a very fascinating correlation. So the Avodas Yisrael says the following. He says, we know there is a cruz. The cruz is a proclamation, the same letters as Zachor, to remember. A cruz that comes out of Shemayim every day from Har Sinai that says, woe to those who neglect Torah. Every day there is like a calling to make sure that we're connected to a life of Torah. He says, who listens to this calling? So sometimes we get this feeling of hisaurus, of renewal. Today I'm going to be better. Today I'm going to work harder. That's coming from this calling. But he's saying a person who watches what they see, who's careful about their ayin, who's careful about what comes into them, such a person is going to be able to take what they experience in life as a hisaurus of being able to serve Hashem. That's the idea of the cistern not losing any drops. The cistern is able to take in everything and be able to utilize everything. When can we be like the cistern, taking in everything around us? When we've learned to train our eye just to see the things that we need to see, see, and not to be able to see the things that are harmful for us to see. And I'll just add here that this is one of the greatest challenges that we have in our day and age, to be able to have Shmiras Einayim. Once upon a time, there was, perhaps some of you remember, there was something called a phone, that you only could listen into the phone. The phone wasn't something that you had the entire world that you could see on the palm of your hand. We're in a generation of very much a visual generation, where we are bombarded by visual images. I just had breakfast with a friend of mine yesterday, and she was telling me she was reading an article online, and then it was a hyperlink to something else, which hyperlinked to something else, and she's telling me from one article to another article. There's so much that we are being bombarded at right in front of our eyes. And not everything that comes up from hyperlink to hyperlink is appropriate to see. And should we see? And should we read? And it's hard because it's right there in front of us. And it's different than if you have to go to the library or go to the newsstand and buy it and then read it. It's obviously there in front of you. So we have a greater challenge in Shmiras Einayim, in watching ourselves. And I think that is lesson number 1 that we learn from the Parsha, is that the dimming of Yitzchak Avinu's eyes was as a result of his interaction with a Rasha. And when you see a Rasha, and when you see acts of rishus, and you see acts of disgracing God's names, it makes an effect on you. It impacts you. You become what you see. It desensitizes you. It builds you into a different type of person. I remember, and I've quoted this before, when I was teaching in Eula in 11th grade, and I took the kids bowling once, and I had a couple of kids in my car, we had different people driving, some of the kids were driving, and there was a billboard of selling jeans, where a man and a woman were, on top of each other, literally. And as we're driving down, Pico Boulevard, these billboards take up more space than they should. And I pointed out to the kids, I said, look at this billboard. I wanted them to see how right in front of you, Pico Boulevard, Major Street, there's lack of sneers. And the immediate reaction of these 11th graders were, Mrs. Smiles, you shouldn't be looking at this. They were very concerned for my level of sneers, but for them, it was a total desensitization, like we've seen this all the time. That's a problem. And it's a challenge, and we have to be at least aware of this challenge of how what we see impacts how we think, how we view things, and how sometimes we become desensitized to things. On this idea that he was blinded by the Ashan Shel Elu, the instance of these people is because he turned a blind eye and these things happen in his house. And that's the imagery of the Ashan, of the incense. It's this smoke of idolatry that fills the whole house, where evil is being permeated, so to speak, in the environment around you. The Sfarim point out, and this is brought in the Shariora, as well as the Rav Shalom and other Sfarim, is that Shashochad Shalakach Me'esav Hi Shegarmar Lo Ta'ud Zeh, and this is what made him that he became blind. That it wasn't only looking at the Rasha, but interacting with him and taking this shochad, this bribe. Ki ha-shochad ya'aver einei pikchim, right? Einei tzadikim. The shochad blinds the eyes of the righteous, of the wise. You see this by Yitzchak Avinu, that he took shochad, kitzai befiv, by the food and the questions that Esav asked him. And because he was so enamored, so to speak, by what Esav offered him, he was being bribed by him. And when he was bribed by him, he no longer saw clarity whatsoever. And that, my friends, is perhaps the first approach. And how is it able that Yitzchak Avinu could give the bracha to Esav? The answer is he lacked clarity of vision. He wasn't able to see who Esav was. That imagery of the first interpretation of Rashi is the topic sentence. It's explaining the whole parak. How could he have given him the bracha? The answer is he was blinded by the incense. He was blinded by the rishus, by the evil. He was blinded by the bribery. He wasn't able to see clearly. Now, when we say such an answer, and we've done this before, we must bring in the piece of Rav Neventhal. And that is, we are talking about Gedolei Olam, Shehem Mamudei Olam V'Yisodav. We're talking about the greatest people possible. And clearly, if the Torah is writing, there has to be a lesson for us to learn on our level. So when we're talking about Yitzchak Avinu taking bribes, it's not about Yitzchak Avinu taking bribes. It's what's the message that I can get out of the parsha. And that when you look at it on this level, you're not looking for absolute truth. We don't know absolute truth. We know relative truth. And relative truth is what message can I as an individual learn from this parsha. Nothing really to do with Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu is Yitzchak Avinu. It's beyond us. But what is perhaps just reading the pshat through the eyes of Chazal, what can I gain from this on one level of the 70 levels, and again, not in any way implicating Yitzchak Avinu? And again, 21, the asterisk, we're not looking for absolute truth. But looking at the pshat to see the simple interpretation, how we can apply this to our lives. We have one answer. How could Yitzchak Avinu have given the Brachos? The answer is Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav Kisayid Befi. This is what the answer the Torah gives on our level. Al Shochad Lo Sholim Shelo. You can be a Navi, you can be an Olat Tvima, you can be a Kadosh Elokim. What the Chumash is teaching us is that if you accept bribery on any level, you are affected by the bribery. And that's why you hear so many stories of rabbis, who are going to officiate at a Beis Din, and they cross the bridge, and then somebody helps them across the bridge, and then later that's one of the litigants. The rabbi says, I can't see your case. You helped me cross the bridge. I'm already biased to you. There's so many different aspects of what shochad is. It's not just money bribery. Doing a favor for somebody, helping somebody out already skews the balance. And that is Muvan me'elav sheyitzchak lo hargish chalila shashochat shemakis lo esav poel mashpil rikshotav. He really wasn't even aware of this. It was betat hakara. It was beneath his ability. It was in his subconscious. And that's why Yitzchak thought he was ra'ui lebracha. Because of the Sayyid Befiv, the way he would pretend to be such a great tzaddik, asking, how do you be Maaser, the Tevin, the Melach? This was all of his way. And this explains why Eilahem in 22, B'cholofim Shatam Shel Dvarim, the Torah is telling us what Shochad does. Shochad Zayah Gamasiva Li'Iver B'Pol Shayna Yitzchak. It's what affected physically his eyesight. And that's why his eyesight was dimmed. And this is why in 23, Rivka Imenu doesn't try to even convince Yitzchak, hello, husband here, I think you really should know who Yitzchak is, who Yaakov Avinu is and who Esav is, and this really isn't the right person to give the bracha to. No, she doesn't do that. Why? Because kasher yesh shochad higayon eino poel. When shochad is in play, logic leaves. There is no room for both. A person is influenced by where they're holding and where they're at. And this is the lesson that we need to learn from this parsha. That we have to understand how powerful a shochad is. So when we have the idea of the first idea of Rashi, of the Ashan, of the incense, so that God blinded his eyes, either not to see this incense, that's one way of looking at it, or two, because he had turned a blind eye to all that was going around him, and was under the curse of Avimelech, he lived in a home where he didn't stop this evil from going on, and therefore this incense was the outcome of this. And therefore when a person is so influenced by the bribery that they take, and they don't even realize that a person is a Rasha, this is the Metzias. This is what happens to the extent that you're ready to give him the bracha. And this lesson, I think, is a very important one for us in 24. You're right. Most of us aren't judges and we don't take bribes in that way. How is this relevant for us? So my friend, in an offer you can't refuse notes, he says, every decision we make, everything that we do is instigated by reasons within reasons and motives within motives. But often we don't realize it. The Torah says, Hashochar ya'aver einei chachamim. Bribery blinds the eyes of the wise. We're in a constant state of being bribed by our subconscious, which seeks to gain advantage of what we're not even aware of. So we speak without knowing why we say the things we do, and we act without realizing why we do the things we do. But there are always reasons. And if we really want to gain control of our lives, we owe it to ourselves to discover our own hidden agendas and motives. Sometimes you'll hear people say, look, I admit I'm no gay, that I'm biased, but I'm telling you that this information I'm giving you is the pure and simple truth. They may think that once they acknowledge their bias, they're capable of giving you the pure and simple truth. But they are absolutely wrong. Their bias blinds them and distorts their vision. They themselves wouldn't recognize the pure and simple truth if it was staring them in the face. The measure of a personal greatness, therefore, is the extent of a person's ability to rise above his hidden agendas, to resist the rationalizations and distortions offered up by his bias, and to face the unadulterated truth with courage and determination. And in this respect, we have what to learn from therapists. That therapists know that sometimes what their client says to them triggers them. But they're also very well aware that when they're triggered, they have to ask, was it something the client said that triggered them? Is there something within me, in my personal life, that I was triggered that really wasn't trigger worthy from what they said? And be able to see, from what am I affected by, and to be able to have a supervisor to say, did I respond coming from me, or did I respond coming from the best needs of what the client is? And those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. That when we are, obviously you can't have this thought every time you're having a conversation with somebody, you'll go crazy, and then you'll need a therapist. But having said that, when we are in a very sticky situation and we're very, very stubborn in saying a certain idea and people around us are trying to talk to us, ask ourselves, why aren't I listening? What is it about me that makes me so biased? And am I biased because of a certain reason? Do I have a certain relationship? Do I have a certain background? And be able to filter out what is really more or less the absolute truth and what is the relative truth based on my personal experiences. If a person's able to do that type of dissection, and even in certain areas in their life, then that's a person who's raised themselves to a higher level. That's a person of honesty. That's a person of growth. And that's the type of people we want to be. So the first level, how could Yitzchak Avinu have given him the brachos? Did he not know who Esav was? When you're bribed, when you're blinded, when you look at the face of a Rasha, when you don't stop a Rasha from doing what he's doing, you become blind. And when you become blind, you're not able to see the entire picture. And when you're not able to see the entire picture, you indeed believe that he is deserving of the brachos. That, my friends, is level one, and again, not so much about Yitzchak Avinu, but as more so about what we can learn for our lives. The second aspect of Rashi, which will give us our second approach of how could Yitzchak Avinu have given him the brachos, is found in the second part of Rashi, that the angel's tears blinded him. So obviously the angel's tears is imagery. As the Mayam Be'Shavah says in 26, Hinei ein safek shedivrei chachamim bazeh einam ela mashal linyan amok. It's a parable for something much deeper. And he says perhaps the idea is that the angels who cried were the angels of Rachamim, the angels of pure mercy. And when they cried, again, it's imagery, what they put into him was pure mercy without any judgment. And therefore, when he got older, all he could look at was seeing things with a good eye, with an eye of rachamim, with ladun l'kaschut, and able to only see goodness in all the people around him. His vision became changed vision. Rav Pinkus, a little bit differently, in 25, note, he says it's like a person, when he saw the image of heaven, his whole life was like, when a person's focusing on, let's say, a beautiful a beautiful view, and then you hold up a pen in front of him, even though he sees the pen, his focus is on that view. He's not taking his eyes off of that view. That was Yitzchak Avinu's life. He saw spirituality. He saw the heavens opened up at the binding of the Isaac, of the Akedah. That's all he saw was spirituality. So even when he sees a Russia in front of him, he doesn't see Russia. He sees spirituality, and everything is in that context of spirituality. This explains, says Rav Malevsky in Ner Uzio, that Yitzchak represents the Jewish ideal state. For this reason, 27, God did not permit him to leave Eretz Yisrael. Ideally, a Jew should reside in Eretz Yisrael at all times. This also explains why Yitzchak, unlike Avraham and Yaakov, married only one wife, Rivka, even though she was barren. Ideally, a Jewish marriage should only be one wife. Yitzchak's experience at the Kedah had raised him to a status of holiness, entirely sanctified to God. Yitzchak no longer functioned through a will of his own, in the sense that we understand human will. He rather viewed himself as nothing but the object of God's will in this world, a sacrificial offering placed upon his altar. Yitzchak only saw the ideal, continuing in 28. This is the deeper intent of the verse. His eyesight was fading. Yitzchak developed a form of spiritual tunnel vision, which blinded him to the harsh reality of this imperfect world. He had hoped that Yaakov and Esav would work in unison to disseminate the word of God throughout the world. He envisioned that Esav would subdue the nations that opposed monotheism, while Yaakov would teach the doctrines of Abraham. Between the two of them, they would conquer the world and introduce belief in the one God to all humanity. Rivka, however, discerned that Yitzchak's dream would never materialize, because Esav could not be depended on. He succumbed to the powerful physical impulses that coursed through his being and became immersed in sin. Yitzchak tried to warn Yitzchak of the danger of Esav presented to the spiritual future of mankind to no avail. Yitzchak simply refused to accept that his prophetic vision would not be fulfilled. With no other recourse, Rivka urged Yaakov to impersonate his brother and take possession of the mighty blessings Yitzchak had intended to grant Esav. Yitzchak's ideal vision eventually did become manifested, and that's what Rashi alludes to between Rabbi Yehuda and Antonius, and their relationship was the ideal Yaakov and Esav relationship. My friends, on this level, Yitzchak Avinu only saw good. If on the first level, Esav is bad, he didn't see the bad because of where he's coming from. On this level, Yitzchak Avinu only saw goodness in everyone around him. Now, and he had a vision. He had a vision that is like a Yisachar-Zvulun relationship. Malvin speaks about this at length, that they would both work together. Esav would subdue the nations, and Yaakov Avinu would teach them. And together they'd be able to create the Yaakov Avinu learning in the tents, and the Esav being able to support him. Why did Yitzchak Avinu think this? Did Yitzchak Avinu not know who Esav was? So you're right. On some level there is this tunnel vision. On some level there is this, seeing the beautiful spirituality and being blinded from anything else. But we're mistaken if this is where we begin and end. There's a fantastic essay of Rav Yitzchak Isaac Sher, the Slobodka Rosh Yeshiva, and this is his theme song throughout his writings. And anyone who wants to understand a section in Tanakh from a different point of view than we learned in elementary school, this is a safer to go to. And he says, we run into a problem where we learn things as little children, and then, and according to Mr. Sharm in this, and then, as adults, we have a fixed image and view, and we're so fixed on this that we can't hear anything else, and we say anything else is impossible. And he says that's a real challenge. And he says a perfect example of this is Esav. We look at Esav, you've seen the picture books that draw Esav, this fierce looking, hunter with mean eyes and ready to kill the world. He says that is really not the correct vision of Esav. We know that Esav, Medrash says, served his father with royal clothes, and he was very loyal to his father. And he brings us a fascinating proof of the greatness of Esav. It's the following. We really have only one story in the Chumash about who Esav was, and that is he comes back tired from the field, and he sees that his brother, aside from the Brachos obviously, he sees that his brother has lentil soup, and he says to him, Haliteni na min hadom hadom, give me some of this red soup. And Yaakov Avinu says, I'll make an exchange for you. And he says, I'm dying, just give me the soup. And he gives him the soup. And the Chumash says, because he called this soup, Haliteni na min hadom hadom, we're not saying the lentils, but from that red thing, we now call him Esav. We now call him Edom, the red one. So you look at this, says Rav Sher, and say, the fact that the Chumash is calling him on the fact that something inappropriate came out of his mouth, that he called something by, its characteristic and not by what it was, that we, catch him immediately and say, from now on you're going to be called by this mistake. Mashma me said that he must have been on a pretty high level if that's his biggest mistake. Now you'll say to me, whoa, are there not midrashim that talk about the 5 Averos that he did that day? So Rav Sher goes through that and he says you have to see it from the perspective of Chazal. Yes, he killed Nimrod, but he killed Nimrod really originally l'shem shamayim. In the end, his actions showed that it really may not have been l'shem shamayim, but he was trying to eradicate evil. And when he has all these women who he's trying to convince to become his wives, you could say it was l'shem shamayim to bring more people under the house of Yaakov Avinu, under the house of Yitzchak Avinu, under the house of Abraham Avinu. People wanted to be their Pilegesh, people wanted to be their concubines. And in a certain way, Esav really believed, right? That's the pig, but he really believed that he was Muslim. Esav, from the word Atsui, he was whole. And Esav believed that what he was doing was Shem Shemayim. And the imagery of Esav is not this wild hunter. The imagery of Esav is a big tzaddik. Is a person who's shomer Torah mitzvos. But the problem with Esav is that internally his midos are wrong. Internally he's not connected. That's why we've seen the Lekach Alivav who says Esav's head is buried in Maris Machpelah. His head was in the right place. He knew a tremendous amount. He wasn't able to take the head and connect it to his physical body in order to implement it. His head and his heart weren't joined together. And that's our challenge in learning. It's not to just know things intellectually, but to allow us to change us emotionally in who we are and be able to say, I'm changed as a result. So when Yitzchak Avinu is giving Esav the brachos, he's giving Esav the bracha with an understanding that Esav is indeed a great person. Atah 31, Nichashev lanu, Ech bikesh Yitzchak Avinu, Sheinaim ta'arod lo. Yitzchak Avinu, who had such pure eyes, Hasofel, Mabim Sofel, Lamvat Sofel, and in fact this verse bring down that a blind person has a deeper understanding of being able to see than a regular person does. Ubevadai yada beruach kadsho machshavo b'nei ish. And obviously he knew what was inside of a person. Navi Elokim Kadosh Amar Lo. Keep in mind, Yitzchak Avinu knew about the sale of Yosef. I mean, it wasn't that he was totally out there, out to lunch blind. He was very well aware. But in this case, he only saw goodness. How could he have wanted to give him the bracha? Because the negativity of Esav was deep in him. That the vision of Yitzchak Avinu, the vision of purity, the vision of goodness, wasn't able to see anything but good. He saw the way Esav presented him. But only Hashem, who sees within a person, understood that Esav is, from the word Asui, he's already made, and he is not who you think he is. And that's why Rivka needed to have a nevuah of a Rav Yavot Seir to change this, because it was not something that was so apparent around. And Yitzchak Avinu finally sees this, right, when Gehenna opens up, when he tells Esav, you are going to serve your brother, you'll work on your mitos, you'll work on your humility. And Esav goes berserk with this. And then Yitzchak understood that if a person isn't able to have this humility to work on who he is, then maybe indeed he is not who he claims to be. On this second level, how could Yitzchak Avinu have given him the bracha? Because he saw only goodness. Yes, part of seeing only goodness came from the Akedah, and he had spiritual tunnel vision, but part of it was because Yitzchak Avinu saw what was there to be seen. Only greatness. And again, you have to read his essay when he goes through the different parts of Esav's life to see how we have to understand them in the eyes of Chazal different than we understood them as little children in our coloring books. But that he was a great person, and he could have been the the next line of Yitzchak, and it was only HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Bochen, Klayos, V'Leiv that saw this. I'll just add parenthetically. You may be saying to me, or in your mind, but don't we have the medrash that when they were in the womb, Esav, when he passed the Avodah Zarah, he wanted to go out, and when Yaakov passed all Shem Vever, he wanted to go out. So if you take a look at the medrash, it never says what he wants to go out to do. It doesn't say he wants to go out to serve. He may want to go out to destroy them. So don't say that anyone was built in with a predestination to be, right? And this is Rav Dessler, that Yitzchak Avinu saw in Esav, Matzav, Mina, Mino, this attribute of Gvura, of working on oneself, of being able to conquer. When he wasn't ready to conquer, when he was ready to work on his mitos, then Yitzchak Avinu understood that if that's what the hallmark of a Jew is. The hallmark of a Jew is a person who's a Yaakov, who's an Akev, who's a heel, always trying to move further. And when, I've said this many times, when a GPS says you have arrived, Higatem Layad, it's so anti-Jewish. We've never reached it. We've never made it. Our whole lives on Me'ah Esrim is about a spiral and a process. So the first answer of Rashi is the Ashan Shalelu. It's the clouded vision. It was the bribery. It was looking at the Rasha that he wasn't able to see him clearly. Be careful in our own lives how we are bribed, how we are biased by things we do and things we say, and how important it is to learn what the effects are, as well as how careful our environment has to be, how careful we have to be with what we hang up on the walls in our home, how careful we have to be with what picture books we show our children. Say, it's just a picture book of kids. No. How careful we have to be of what our kids see. How careful we have to be with what visions come to us, what we look at, because we are so affected and desensitized to the point where a person can read the New York Times and read and see pictures of fire, of murder, of earthquakes, of devastation, destruction, and be drinking coffee and eating a croissant and not thinking twice. There's a problem with that. On the second level, he had this spiritual vision. The angel's tears are the tears of Rachamim. He was only able to see pure goodness. But there was what to see, a pure goodness. And indeed, Esav was a tremendous potential candidate for greatness. The third idea, and I think this is, in my mind, the big chiddush for today, is the idea of the Lehi Gayon, which offers us such a beautiful insight, and a beautiful insight for life. He says, Uperish Rashi Vatechena 34, Kadeshi told Yaakov at the Brachos. Why was he blind? In order for Yaakov to get the Brachos. And the simple level is, it was Hechi Timsi. What's an easy way of Yaakov getting the Brachos? He can't see. If he can't see, he's able to fool him and get the Brachos. But again, our question which we had raised earlier is, was it necessary for Yitzchak Avinu to be blind to give Yaakov the Brachos? Could not have happened in another way? And he says further, later on we find Bnei Yisrael that when Yaakov Avinu gives Brachos to his children and grandchildren, he also can't see. Why was it that Yaakov couldn't see? And we also find a Gemara. The Gemara about Metzia says, Ein habracha masuya, blessing is not found, lo b'davar shakul v'lo b'davar madud, and something that is measured, and something that can be weighed, v'lo b'davar hamanui, and not something that can be counted. Ela b'davar hasamui min ha'ayin, but only something that is hidden from the eye. And now we understand that in order to really give a bracha, a precondition is blindness, is an inability to see. What is a bracha about? How does a bracha work? So he says in 35, the mahuta bracha, the essence of a bracha, is seeing the potential a person has. The kasher adam gadol mivarech, when a great person blesses, hu makir ma'amet lemidbarech et hakochot atzurim bo. What he's doing is making the person realize what kochos hanefesh he has, and showing him that he can reach great heights if he just puts himself toward that goal. As Rabbi Leff points out in Outlooks and Insights in 36, the greatest blessing one can bestow is to enlighten another and acquaint him with himself. The Mishnah says in Avos, man is precious having been created in God's image. and even more so, for having been informed that he was created in God's image. Self-knowledge of one's abilities and talents, as well as one's shortcomings and limitation, is the greatest blessing. It is the means enabling one to realize his divine mission in the world. And that's why, and this is a very powerful idea, when you see something in front of you, so then it takes away potential, because this is what you have in front of you. It's counted, it's measured, it's seen, and therefore bracha can't fall on this, because it's all here. Bracha is about potential. That's why some people close their eyes when they give a bracha. It's that idea of anything's possible. It's boundless. I'm not bounded by what only I see in front of me. My blessing to you is to take the potential, to take what is not seen and be able to develop it. And now we understand why Yitzchak Avinu did not want to bless Yaakov, because Yaakov was an Ishtam Yoshev Olim. He was complete, he was whole. Obviously, as we spoke about, he's an Akav and working on himself, but he has developed to such a great degree so much of his potential. Who needed the bracha? The bracha was needed by an Esav. Esav is an Ish Sadeh, he's a man of the field. And that's why Yaakov Avinu has to dress up like Esav, so that Yitzchak Avinu should feel that I have an Ish Sadeh, I have a man of the field, I have a warrior in front of me, and he is somebody who needs the bracha, and therefore would be able to give Yaakov Avinu the bracha. Had Yitzchak Avinu been told, Yaakov needs the bracha, and not Esav, he wouldn't have been able to give him a real bracha, because in his mind he would say, you've developed yourself to such a great deal. It's your brother who needs the bracha. By having him blind is the ability to see beyond, to see limitless possibilities. Dressing up like Esav, he feels that the one in front of him has so much limitless possibilities that need to be blessed. Perhaps this idea is echoed in The Juggler and the King, when he speaks about the word for Adam, man, is derived from Adam, and there's no verbal coincidences. When a seed is planted in it, in the earth, has a unique power to provide the environment to which the seed's hidden potential for life is expressed and the actuality of fruit. It's the same with man. He is born with an innate yearning to serve God, a yearning which is the seed of his spiritual life. A man, like earth, has the capacity to express his potential in the actuality of life, full of spiritual activity. In other words, man, Adam, is meant to be God's garden, his Adama, and bring forth a unique fruit. I think it's such a beautiful description. The fruit of his labors is a life of unselfish devotion to the service of God. But not all earth has the capacity to yield fruit. Only earth which is cultivated retains its power, whereas a fallow field soon loses most of its ability to create produce. Not much can grow in a neglected field, and what little does, unprotected is from the ravages of animals and the element, brings negligible benefit to man. Once again, it's the same with man, a life which does not express man's innate spirituality, because it is directed self-servingly instead of towards the service of God, as compared to a fallow field, unworked, unfenced, and unproductive. Esav is called an Ish Sadeh, a man of the field, because Esav represents the one who had tremendous potential that had to be developed. And when Yaakov Avinu dresses up like Esav, Yitzchak Avinu is able to give him this bracha. And he gives many examples of this, where he says, when Elisha tells the Isha Mana, just laying this out of Torah, that bring as many kalim as you can and fill it up with oil. When it's in the form of potential, the miracle hasn't yet happened. You can take as many pots as possible. But once the blessing has begun, then when you finish your pots, that's it. Blessing is the vow, that which is not seen, that which is not counted, that which does not meet the eye. And that's why it's interesting, by Moshe Rabbeinu it says, Lo katai now. His eyes weren't dim. Do you know why? Because he saw everything from now to the end of time. Yom acharon, Yom acharon. He saw everything clearly in front of him. There was no point of potential. And that's a deeper understanding. And when Moshe Rabbeinu wants to go into Eretz Yisrael, and the Gemara in Sota says, does he need to eat of the fruit of the land? Fruit is about potential. Moshe Rabbeinu isn't about potential, about that which is not yet here. Moshe Rabbeinu is about that which can be counted and calculated. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu can't go into Eretz Yisrael for the potential of an unborn yet fruit, because that's not Moshe Rabbeinu. His eyes never dim. He's in the world of being able to see everything, but often galui, in a manifested type of way. And this also explains the Gemara in Tanis, which has turned into a song. That's how a lot of people know Psukim or Gemaras, of a person who wants to Ilani Landa Mavarechacha, tree, how can I bless you, right? Your fruit is already sweet, and your the water bayou is already abundant, and the shade is already there. So in what way can I bless you for having enjoyed the fruit, the water, and the shade? He says that all the payrots that come from you should be as beautiful as you. Why? Because the bracha is about the future. The bracha is samui. It's about that which is hidden. It's about the potential. In the potential of the future, I can give a bracha. When I have something here, it's much harder, because it's something that is limited, right? You can't say, woman's 9 months pregnant, I hope it's a boy. It's a tefillah shab. It's in the world. A bracha is about the unborn. We want our children to become. We want them to have the potential to grow. Not what they already have, but what we long for them to be. That's the koach of a bracha. And along these lines, we'll conclude with what the Otros HaMusar points out, is that when you go to somebody's house, a person shouldn't show you all of their wealth and everything that they own. So there is this idea of an ayin hara, and an ayin hara is that, the people who are looking at all this wealth say, does this person really deserve this? And that thought, does this person really deserve this, opens a petach and shamayim, well, maybe they don't deserve this, maybe it should be taken away from them. And that's why it's very important that when you compliment someone for what they have, you say, I understand it's Brachos that Hashem has given to you this out of kindness, and recognize its source all comes from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But a person should be very careful of what they flaunt, of what they show. And he says very clearly, he says, aside from the ayin hara, it's the idea in the asterisk in 42. Ve'ein habracha mitzuya el b'davar samui min ayin. You want bracha to exist in your home. Don't flaunt everything you have. And this is not only in your property, it's also in who you are as a person. Be able to keep this idea of privacy, this idea of inwardness, because what's not shown has a potential bracha. If everything's out there, so you've limited your bracha capacity. And that's why the Alei Shur in source 40 notes that when a person goes out to his threshing floor and he says, oh, look what I have, and I count what I have, there's no opportunity for a bracha, because it's measured. And the best thing for a person to do is to say, I recognize that God is the one who gives me my bounty, and I am aware that all that I have comes from the bounty of God. That's potential. That's the realization that it can increase, it can grow. And that's the whole idea of what tznius is about, this internal life of not flaunting everything. Not tznius in clothes, tznius in living, and being able to have this inner world, this world of bracha, this world of clothes, this world of inability to see. And that, my friends, is, I think, the lessons that we learn from this week's parsha. 1, how careful we have to be about what we see, our environment. 2, be able to see how influenced we are by the shochad, by bribery, by being nogeh badavar. 3, by being able to recognize how we can't be like Esav, I'm a complete person, but ready to humble ourselves and have the humility that we always have to grow. And finally, to realize that real bracha is about potential. Real bracha is that which you can't see. And to be very careful not to flaunt everything we have, but to keep things under the radar, so to speak. A, for ayin hara, and B, for the sense of bracha, that the more something is not, this is what I have, right? How many children do you have? People say how many. It brings it out there. How much do you have? Well, I'm worth $4 million. It brings it out there. If you say, Hashem has given me a lot of bracha. It gives room for a lot more bracha. And we know that bracha is found. Samui mina ayin, sneas internally is what brings a tremendous amount of shefa bracha. Yaakov Avinu had to be blind in order to give Yaakov the bracha, because in that way he would be able to see the potential inherent in Yaakov Avinu, and indeed not focus in on what he already has, but what the tremendous amount that there is left to have in this whole arena of the Birkas Haaretz, and that was the bracha specifically to Yaakov Avinu and not to Esau.